Welcome to Bona Fide Dialogues.
Hi, Christina, how are you?
Doing fine, thank you.
In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona Fide Dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
So I know you as a lawyer, but there's a different life that you live in parallel with your legal career. It's being a musician.
That is correct,
And
yes.
I'm very interested in learning more about it.
𝒷𝓇𝓊𝒾𝓃𝓊𝒾𝓃𝓄𝑒, also known by his stage name Emm, is a Swiss corporate and M&A lawyer that also has a 20-plus year career in the music industry, namely the hip-hop and rap industry. For over a decade, he has shaped the dialect hip-hop scene, known for his profound lyrics, intelligent self-irony, and socially critical reflections. His music moves between playful lightness and biting critique. He tackles the superficiality of the social media generation, the tension between fame, money, and true happiness, addressing the big questions of life. The dichotomy between his professional career and his music career, and the balancing act between his legal profession and the stage, is a recurring theme and reflects his dual identity as both lawyer and artist. Rap is commonly believed to mean rhythm and poetry.
This is gonna sound crazy, but when I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9, I sort of got introduced to, like, for lack of a better word, like hip hop culture, rap music, urban music, probably what you would call it these days. And my, if you will, music career outside of just being, sort of young and naive and like being attracted to this like phenomenon as a whole, actually started as a music journalist. So like I wrote articles, reviews, etc., like did interviews for an online hip hop magazine that was actually founded and located in the US, in Los Angeles. And since these people who founded that magazine had strong ties to not only Europe but Switzerland especially, for whatever reason I kind of came on their radar, and I started writing again articles and did interviews for them, just basically as a kid that was highly interested in these things. And it just so happened, and I think that is probably the most decisive element, that at that time, the internet as a means of music promotion really only just came up. So all of a sudden, the music industry as a whole was probably like looking at the internet as a way to reach people outside of, if you will, classic promotional activities, print magazines, all of these things. So the internet was really like sort of early, like that was early stages. And our site, which again was only created by a funny accident, because the guy who did this thing, he actually had a snowboard accident. He could not go to work for like 3 months, and he was at home and he was bored, and he just figured, you know what, I'll just learn how to code websites. And it was just one of the things, I think one of the, if you will, passions that were around in that circle of friends was hip hop and rap music. But like the chance for it to go whatever other direction content wise was probably like 50-50 at that point.
Interesting. So rap was your first passion before law, right?
Oh, way before. Like, don't ever tell my dad because he's a lawyer. But that was like, I think my longest and earliest passions was probably, like, to this day still are, it's probably like football as in soccer, or maybe sports in general, and music with a focus, if you will, on that type of music. And I think the reason why all of this, which started as like this sort of bedroom project, with this website, whatever, all of a sudden became so big is because especially the US music industry, they were looking for outlets online. And we just happened to be one of the first websites that was out there, that had sort of like a decent setup, where labels could call in, could send in CDs, and we would actually write about these CDs, and you wouldn't even have to pay us because we were and we just love this stuff, right? And that is how this website all of a sudden became really big. I think it was like the second biggest hip hop magazine online in the US, behind I think aka.com, which, if I remember correctly, was actually funded and sponsored by some label directly. So it was like an
What's
independent
the
hip hop
name of
mag.
that magazine
It
or
doesn't exist anymore.
website?
The magazine's name was sixshot.com. So like a revolver, six shots, sixshot.com. That was, again, it doesn't exist anymore. And that is how I really sort of got into these things even more, also like from a music industry perspective. But I was very, you know, my mindset when it came to that music was very US driven, in the sense that this is how I got exposed to that stuff. I wrote in English. You know, my reviews were, if you will, made for a US American readership. So very much directed, you know, across the pond, if you will, not for like my local Swiss whatever people.
Yeah.
And I think back then we didn't even really know or like realize how sort of big that was overseas. I remember when I went to this is a funny story. Like when I went to the US for the first time, that was like in 2001, I think. I was like 18, and I don't know, I weighed probably like 70 pounds total. And I wrote an email to the people at Rockefeller, which was back then, you know, Jay-Z's label. And I basically emailed them, and I think I emailed them, and I'm not kidding, I think I emailed them out of an internet cafe in like FedEx. So somewhere in Midtown New York, I was there, and I emailed them, and I was like, hey, you know, if you don't mind, I would really like to come by and meet you guys. They were like, yeah, come by. And it was
really?
Like, I could tell it was way bigger for them because it was like relationship management. For me, it was like, well, maybe they have like 5 or 10 minutes. So like that was the first time I actually sort of realized how big, for a second anyway, I don't want to overdo it, but like for a second, that thing was what we did in the US. And funny enough, the fact that I only started writing my own stuff so late is because I grew up so much on like, I think, US driven music, that I always had the feeling, if you don't do that in English, it's going to be ridiculous. And English is not my first language. So it always felt like I'm translating emotions more than channeling emotions, if that makes sense. And only a couple years later, when hip hop sort of became an international phenomenon in different languages, and I saw the first people try their luck or taking a stab at, like, you know, these things in German and Swiss German and French and whatnot.
And from Eastern Europe, same thing was happening there too.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're trying to
only
adapt.
then I figured, you know what, why don't I try this myself? So it's like somewhat funny and somewhat odd, but like I had so much, if you will, emotional investment in this culture, and like I grew up with, you know, all the rules and like the do's and the don'ts and all of that stuff, and I took that very seriously. So there was like, for a long time, there was almost like how to put that, like there was almost like some sort of shame to even try and translate that into another environment, another culture, another language. And other people then started doing that, and that was sort of what took away that barrier.
Open the door for you.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you've been involved with all of this from the beginning, right? It's like this is when all of this started, even here in the US.
Yeah. I mean, partly, obviously, you know, if we want to keep it super real from a cultural perspective, I probably wasn't there from the very beginning. But I think the first record that I ever listened to, which was a hip hop record, I think it was Can't Live Without My Radio by LL Cool J. And that's like an 87, 88 release. And I remember how I got that from my neighbor, and I played it in my parents' place to basically annoy my parents. And I kind of at the same time liked the way it sounded, because it didn't sound like the things my parents listened to. So like I grew up in a household where music played a huge role, but it was sort of classic rock. Like it was, you know, classic rock and pop, like Status Quo, AC/DC sometimes, maybe some Tina Turner, Elton John on the pop end of things, but like that sort of corner. And this thing, you know, that I didn't know anything about just
Very
sounded
disruptive.
completely different. Yeah. And I would say like that to this day, I think the energy that I felt coming from that music, even though I was, you know, not familiar enough with, you know, the culture, the problems, everything that, you know, hip hop supposedly expresses, I think, and obviously my English wasn't that great back then. But like, I think that energy and the way this music like asserts a certain level of dynamic, I think that is what caught me. And then again, it sounded different than everything else. I think the same probably happened to people earlier, like that listened to punk music. It just sounded different, which, you know, made for it to be fresh.
Interesting. And people would think like being a lawyer and a singer and being a part of this rap culture, they're two different things, completely different things. But it's not, because rap is all about, you know, call for justice, right?
I mean, message-wise, I would agree with that. And I think to a certain extent, the two, I wouldn't say it's vice versa, but like in my life, I think, you know, the ability to like use words accurately and like to play with words has probably played in favor of both. But at the same time, I do think, and I can almost like feel it, music, even if it's just writing, which is far away from singing and which is a far away from playing instruments, it's still like not, it doesn't feel the same for my brain. Like, you know, what we do in like the legal space is very much driven by, you know, rational
Logic,
thoughts and like you know, these if then else type of structures. And music also for me personally like sort of goes a different direction. Like I always try, I mean, you know, as with every craft, I think it takes a couple of years to learn how to write these things, like, you know, to develop that skill. But like when I write stuff these days, I literally try to close my eyes and sort of try and come from a gut
heart,
or like, yeah, like a heart or emotional corner of myself rather than my brain. Because
yeah,
it's also
that's
like,
a very good point. Yeah.
I mean, I obviously like, and this is going to sound awful, but like I have the luxury and the privilege that I don't ever need to make money with this. So like I can really have all the fun and all the self-expression in this that I want, rather than, you know, for this to need or like to have or like, or for this to carry the burden of making money.
Yeah. So your stage name is EMM. Is there a story behind it?
There's a story behind it, and funny enough, well, there's two stories actually. Like, so it links back to what I said before about this magazine. So we did this magazine, and like, you know, at first like nobody read this stuff, and then all of a sudden it became, as told before, it became kind of big, right? And since we're all like, we had a couple like locals, US Americans, but like the rest of us wasn't. So we had to come up with somewhat credible email addresses. Like I could not use Mario because everyone was like, yeah, well, what's up with this Italian kid? Like, what the hell does he want to tell us about rap? So I had to come up with an acronym. And back then, and that's the funny part, you couldn't use just one letter. Like I couldn't just use the letter M, which is obviously like the first letter of the name Mario. So I had to come up with this in a phonetic way, which is why it's EMM. But like to this day, I mean, I still use it, but like I think the second story and like that sort of started kind of like, I wouldn't say early, but like maybe like second album or so. I use it as an acronym as well. Like it stands for Every Monday Matters.
Every Monday Matters?
Yes, like it goes against that, cool. You know, that feeling of like, you just basically work to live, and like Monday to Friday, you know, you feel shitty, and then you just live for the weekend. It sort of like tries to flip that, like into a mindset where, you know, you actually love your Mondays because you do something that you like.
The beginning,
Yeah, as opposed to just, you know, I got to pay the bills. Evidently, again, that comes from a point of privilege. Like we all know there's a lot of people that may not be in a position where they can do what they want to do, but they have to do something. But it's just a mindset that stands behind the name, if you will.
Yeah. And was there a moment when you decided to do it professionally?
Hey, not really. Well, I mean, there was a
Or just
moment where,
grew over time,
yeah, like there
getting
was a
better?
moment, there was a moment where, some of my songs, all of us, as per usual, all of a sudden did really well. But I mean, the Swiss market is so small. Even if you make it, you don't really make it. So
Mm.
like, and personally, and don't ever tell my music friends this, but I personally feel, or at least to me, the narrative of like you come from a very low point financially, whatever you want to call it, and you make it to the top. The sort of narrative of the hero was always like, at least in my opinion, that was very much part of like the rap or the rapper narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And in a place where the market would never let you actually become the actual hero. It's like you may come from a sort of low point, which is not as low as in other places. So even that is not really credible.
Yeah.
But even if you make it, you don't really make it. It's like you walk, but then you take the train. It's never you walk and then you drive a Lambo. So it takes away from that, hip hop narrative, if you will, at least on a commercial side of things, obviously not politically or whatever. But in that way, like I always kind of knew that in order, like for me to ever live off of that and like comfortably, I would have had to go all pop or try to go all popular music. And at least here, like this is a very literal thing, the people, which is obviously like the same etymological, back trunk as the word popular, they don't know hip hop culture like that. They will not understand that. So you need to sort of compromise on what you're doing on a grand scale in order for this to ever be successful. So like I think I never like commercially successful. So I don't feel I don't think I've ever really contemplated that, if that makes sense. But also, had I ever done that, I think it would have taken away some of the fun that I had doing it, right?
No, I love your music. I don't always understand what you're saying. You mixing languages, or sometimes I feel like I understand some words, but it's interesting the way it sounds. Do you have some songs just in English?
No, I don't.
No.
I think what I have, and this is, I think it comes from like a lot of exposure to like US American culture, but also English. I think in my all day, everyday talk, I use a lot of English words. So like even when I talk to my parents, they sometimes ask me, what do you mean? Because I just use English words because I sort of like Germanize them, but it's still the English word, like the English verb or the English, phenomenon that you just can't accurately describe that way in like German or even Swiss German. But ultimately, they're all in Swiss German, all of them.
So Swiss German, but yes, we can hear some words. But if you could tell us, if you could tell us about those words, what are you thinking about? That's interesting. Do you have like specific theme that you focus on, or it's different?
I can answer that question only by looking back at what I did. So like I can tell you now what over the last, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, what my lyrics were about, but I never go at things with this goal in mind, if you will. I think a lot of my music is probably really introspective. I think in a lot of ways I discuss growing older but not growing wiser. I think I discuss, and again, like on an emotional,
in a good way or a bad way. Interesting.
Both. No, it's both. It's I always tell people it's not even about music, right? Like for a very long time in life, which I don't, but unless you have family and kids, like you're always in between going home early or coming home early. One is early 9 p.m. The other one is early, aka 5 a.m. And like you meander between these two, almost like in phases, right? So like in Europe, and it's obviously a bit different, especially on the West Coast. But like for us here, we got like, I don't know, 8 months of some form of winter, right? So as soon as the sun's out, everyone's out early. And I mean early in the morning because they just want to soak it all up, which also means they by tendency go to bed earlier. That completely switches in wintertime. Because it's like you're at home and you're not missing anything, and that is when people go out for longer because they want to catch some sort of social break from this, world of gray that we live in from like December to March or whatever, unless you go to the mountains, which is obviously like sort of our other, way of escape. And I think in that respect, I think growing older but not necessarily growing wiser is a topic. I think what always comes up with me is how I personally feel about me needing validation from other people or other phenomena in life, as opposed to having that self-value, which I think is an incredibly Western problem. Like we just crave, the confirmation and the validation from people, from like, I don't know, bosses.
And it's interesting to hear about this from you, because you come up, because you're a very confident person. So it's very interesting to hear.
Look, I think a lot, I do think I'm confident. I think I'm also very much aware of like my weaknesses, but that doesn't mean just because I'm aware of them that they don't sometimes haunt me. And I do feel, which is probably also a bit of an educational topic overall, that like a lot of people, including probably me as a kid, like I think my parents, they congratulated me and supported me in all of my endeavors, but it was always kind of conditioned by endeavors. It's like I got applauded for doing good things at school, but I had to do good things at school. And that is not, I'm not blaming my parents. I'm just saying like this, the relationship between your
achievements,
your ego and your achievements, how these two like intersect and like play against and off each other, is something, funny enough, it sounds super intellectual, but I think a lot of songs that I write are ultimately about that. And then there's obviously also other songs, like, I'm in a good mood, the weather's nice, I'm having a glass of rosé, whatever music production I get is like more forward and probably more catchy, less, classic, depressive, whatever you want to call it. It just evokes other lyrics, right?
Interesting. I'm still interested in lyrics and learning more. What are you singing about? Maybe you can write some songs in English. That would be wonderful.
Honestly, like I think today I probably would, because also from a language perspective, I feel comfortable enough to do that, but I don't necessarily have the setup here to ever do that. And what I mean by that is I could obviously now after you and I finish a conversation, I could take out, the proverbial pad and pen and try and write something in English. But to then go somewhere or get somewhere with this, you also kind of need that environment around you for these things to happen. Because it's funny, I would not be the first, Swiss person that ever tries to look at music and finds out early the local market is super small. So let's switch languages and try and do this, like sort of expand on like into other countries, whatever you like, markets, whatever you want to call it. But also these countries have their own markets. There's people that actually come from these markets. So it's almost like you're losing that little base, or like that small base that you may have in your own country, for trying to look at a bigger thing. So I would do that.
You lose some, you find some. You lose some, you find some. I think you would be able to influence other people then,
Look, honestly, if for whatever reason, and never say never, I move back to the US, that would probably the route I would take. that would probably be the route I would take, just because, you know, it makes sense. And, you know, even if I ever went to like a US studio, chances are people there speak English. They're probably not going to speak German. So I'm automatically like in another, you know, setup, and I could probably write in English directly there. You know, I don't know if it would be that great, but like I would obviously try that, but it really depends on the environment, if you will. Like with me, I can easily tell that when I'm in the US, especially, you know, after like a week or two, I'm sort of back to thinking almost in English. But like as soon as I move back, it kind of changes. And like the whole structure and, you know, the way I look at life becomes a lot more European all of a sudden again. So like I would probably have to move into like a more, you know, US American environment. And then try to look at this there rather than here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who were the biggest influencers for you in rap? Or maybe not were, but are?
Look, I mean, this is gonna sound crazy old school, but I always obviously had a knack for like music from the West Coast. So I think, you know, even to this day, I would probably say Tupac is probably one of my biggest influences. Not necessarily from a technique perspective. I think there's, you know, better rappers in the sense that they write better. They, you know, they deal with like cadence and words and rhythm patterns better than Tupac. But like on an emotional level, I think Tupac to this day is probably like, I wouldn't say it's the greatest rapper ever, but it's probably like been my biggest influence. And then after that, there's tons. Like I listen to still a lot of Nipsey Hussle, just because it's Los Angeles and like gang culture, and I just like that stuff. But there's also like a lot of, you know, New York artists that I listen to. I think there's probably a couple that sort of like never leave my playlist, but I would also listen to, you know, new stuff. Like if, you know, if a record came out, you know, sort of tomorrow, and I felt like this artist like caught me on this song or that song, I would easily listen to it. But I think, you know, and I know you're doing a podcast, you want to hear some names. So it's like Tupac, Nipsey, Jadakiss, Big L, Jay-Z and Nas, sort of like both in their way, I think. And probably, and this is also a skin color thing, Eminem at some point. Just because, again, you know, in my back then limited, you know, knowledge, I felt like, this guy's opening doors. It's like it made, you know, it just represents you on a certain level, even though like our lives are not comparable. But yeah, I think these back in the day anyway.
I was reading some books by Robert Greene, and I came across this book that Robert Greene wrote for 50 cents. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. So it was
never heard
interesting
of it.
to me. I didn't really know much about 50 Cent. Such an interesting life story, you know?
Oh yeah.
Shot 9 times, survived. Yeah. This is just incredible. You know, he's very creative, like a businessman and musician. I don't know how he survived after 9 shots.
Well, I'm not sure if he knows himself, but what I can tell you is this is the perfect narrative backdrop for the career he's made afterwards. It's to this day, it's funny, like I had this discussion like, I don't know, maybe 2 days ago. It's funny how today, worldwide, it doesn't matter where you are, 50 Cent as a musician in a bar or a club always works. Always. It's the perfect combination of like, it sounds like rap, it sounds sort of gangster, but it's also commercially appealing. Like it's still got that, it's got a commercial factor to it, but it still sort of steers clear of this like cheesy, let's go all pop type of music that, you know, rap sometimes probably tried its luck at. For me, 50, like to this day, his catalog, like the music catalog, I mean, the guy's got smash hits for days. It's unbelievable. And that works everywhere on the planet. Maybe not in a country restaurant or bar, but like wherever hip hop would maybe be played, 50 works always.
Yeah, he's on the mission for sure.
Yeah.
After surviving,
he still is.
He's just moving. He has his like movie production company, and he's singing and touring, and just, I don't know how one person can do that much, as much as he does. Very, very impressive. And I didn't know this is a very interesting book, actually. I recommend people.
Well, I think it's co-written by him, right? It's Robert Greene and 50 Cent. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Yeah, very good book. Very interesting.
Okay. I'll make sure to check it out. You know, you never learn enough, right?
Exactly, exactly. There's so much behind the curtain, you know. We look at people, and it's always interesting to learn their stories. Especially this one is very unique.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think, you know, back in the day, I think that was also what and it's funny because, like, in a lot of ways, you know how, like, and I still think about this to this day, right? If you were a writer, just, you know, you write books, and you do that under your name, and then you write a crime series, and you invent a couple characters, obviously, for that, and then, you know, you write a couple of those, and then all of a sudden you feel like, you know what, I want to do romantic novels. You probably use different characters, but it's still the same person holding the pen, right? You sort of like create that mental environment for A or for B, and you kind of apply different characteristics to the people involved in these stories. And it's funny how especially, and maybe honestly, like, I'm not sure, maybe it's some sort of almost like a profiling type of thing in rap. It was always amazing for the artist if the artist character, which is in this case called 50 Cent, it's not Curtis Jackson, if the artist character had also gone through that in real life. It almost backs up that character as being non-fictional. So, like, as a backdrop, again, like, to what the guy did in music, that story was phenomenal. And we both know it's true. So, but that happened not to the rapper 50 Cent, it happened to a human being.
Exactly.
It translates really well into a rap career, though.
Yeah, interesting. And I wanted to ask you about your creative process.
Oof. I mean, these days, and it, like, you know, I can probably not say that it's just like, it's not always the same process, but what I would say is at some point you kind of found the way where, like, your technique as in how you write things, and then you just need the inspiration for that thought or that emotion to kind of arise, and you just write it down. So I think for me these days, and it's funny because it used to be that way, like it was the other way around. These days I think about the emotion for quite a long time, and then I kind of write it down quite quickly, most of the time, as opposed to back in the day where I think I, you know, kind of took out a pen early on, but it took me way longer to actually put things into word because, quite frankly, I wasn't that good at the craft. So, like, it took me longer to express it. Today, it's more about, like, thinking it through, and then the expression is actually easier. And that is also why these days, that was not the case back then. I rarely ever write before I get the production in. So usually the production, the beat comes first, and that then hopefully does something to me that results in that expression. So per usual, I get you know, whatever, a beat, I write it, maybe I record it here, maybe I record it at the producer studio, and then it's like a step-by-step process from then on. You know, it's like you got to create like a kid, but you got to edit like a professor. So it's basically the creation itself is something that gets almost like evoked by receiving the production or like the beat, and then I write things, and then I go into the studio, and then editing it and getting it really to where we want to have it, you know, again, like with these little super like technical things, you know, there's like too many words in that line and there's too many words in that line, so you don't get the breaks in between. So it's like sort of, you know, tiring for the listener, and then you rewrite that, etc. that is almost always not part of that first expression. The first expression sort of goes unfiltered. And then I try and take it to the studio, because that is also the point where you need somebody else to discuss it with. Like, you have your own feeling, but then feedback helps. While you're writing, it's not helping. Like, you should just basically lock in and do it. So if that is enough for a process, I usually get something and then I write and I record, and then I go to the studio to edit. That is actually the sort of ideal way, if you will.
What inspires you? Like when you travel or you meet new people?
Hey, I think I am lucky enough and at the same time unlucky enough that in life, I absolutely crave inspiration. It's probably like some sort of undiagnosed ADHD. Like, I can't, like, when nothing is going on, I get really nervous. So like, I always need to like shoot energy out into the universe to ideally receive it back from whatever. And in that respect, like, travel is a huge inspiration. New people, a huge inspiration. It very much depends where. I mean, you know, your own sort of community, you kind of know these people, and there's probably not going to be that many surprises. That doesn't mean that people cannot inspire you at all, but like, the inspiration level is probably lower than when, I don't know, you fly around the globe.
Something new.
Exactly. But I think I get most of the inspiration that I do get is like from places and people. That's probably true. It's probably true. And then, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just like sort of inside of me. Per usual, whenever I receive music, meaning, you know, instrumental versions of beats where I'm supposed to write something on it, whatever, I kind of get automatically taken back to some sort of image in my head that matches that. So like, I could go, I don't know, I'm just making up an example, but just because I travel through China for like 6 weeks, that doesn't mean I need to write songs every day. But like, the trip is almost like stored, and then depending on what production I get, it kind of comes back to me. But I certainly am, and it's probably, you know, I would assume you're kind of the same. My brain rarely ever completely shuts off. So like, I would probably have a lot of thoughts on such a trip, and then it just takes the music to kind of translate that into
motion, a
musical, like a music work or like a music product, rather than just, you know, thoughts, if you will. But I think in that respect, it's mostly places and people. Yeah.
Interesting. I have to ask you about AI. Do you think it will influence rap music?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it definitely will. I can only speak for myself. I think and funny enough, I think today's youth, the younger generation, even more so than we connect extremely intensely with people. And while back in the day, like, for example, you know, when I started listening to these things, like, we had a very limited availability of like visuals. Like, a lot of the people that I listened to, I did not know what they looked like outside of maybe the CD cover. I saw that in a store, I bought it, or I got it from a label, but like, I never had, you know, I couldn't YouTube these people. So there wasn't that much availability of things, right? And Instagram and all of these platforms obviously changed that. And in a lot of ways, I think the musical expression has probably become less important, but the character has become more important, because there's so many new ways to actually, you know, illuminate and visualize a character and like present that to people. And I'm not sure if AI, I mean, we all know what AI can do, but I'm not sure if AI is able, on a scale that we know from like today's music industry, to really connect with people at that level. On a character level though, like music wise, it could probably do everything and anything that human beings can do, both production as well as writing, whatever. But like, on a connection level, that may not be possible. Then again, you know, there's so many artists out there that don't necessarily write their own songs. So even now, the visual that that they present to you may not be the originator person of what you're listening to. So like that, you know, that splits already happen and is happening every day, because that's just the way music industry works.
I think it's interesting the way it can impact the process, you know, starting with like writing lyrics, right? People can start using ChatGPT to come up with different versions of what they had in their mind originally, then actual music, then visual representation. There's so many ways, but I hope it doesn't change it too much, you know? It definitely will affect, but hopefully will. Like, I mean, I'm really worried about this connection that you just mentioned.
I think even today, there's probably music out there that on a technical level is perfectly produced, but still doesn't connect with people. And it's either because, you know, your fans do not believe that story, that song to be really in line or fitting for the character they're presented with. And so like the capacity to connect music with message, with character, with credibility, whatever you want to call it. Like, while AI may be a help, I think there's still got to be that human tissue that connects, like, from a producing side, that connects the producing side with the consuming side. That being said, you're absolutely right. There's probably a lot of ways where you could use it, but funny enough, like, for example, for me personally, I wouldn't even know why that should happen, because for me, that process, and since it's not my, you know, this is not my breadwinner job at all, the process is what I actually like. Like, I don't, this is going to sound awful, I don't really care that much about the product, or I don't really care, well, I do, but from an artistic point of view, I don't really care what that product makes. And like, if somebody came to me and told me, look, we got a couple of XLs and this is really what you need to change, blah, 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 I'm not sure to what level I could ever buy into that.
Idea.
Right? Yeah. I'm not sure to what level I could really buy into that.
Yeah, because you're not evaluating it from the commercial point of view.
No, I mean, look, I keep telling people, me going to the studio is like holidays. It's the other half of my brain. It's like a different, you know, approach. And that is also why I keep using the same comparison. People, you know, play tennis, they play golf, whatever they do for leisure. I do all of these things also, but like, music is one of these. Like, there's no the aspiration to like take this somewhere. Like, while I would love for it to go somewhere, that is not the ambition at all. And I
think that's why so many people love your music, because it's so authentic.
I do think that it's like, you know, and this is obviously like a problem of society. Like, I really do this just to have fun. Like, I don't want to, you know, there's no ambitions, there's no ambitions, there's no Excel, there's no milestones, there's no KPIs. I'm not going to talk to HR. It's all just me enjoying myself. And it's you know, I don't know if you saw that.
You can feel it, even if you don't speak German, you can feel it. I can feel it in the music.
It's funny. I saw this, and you probably saw that online. There's this beautiful, like, I don't know, a snippet. I think I saw it on Instagram or wherever, where Matthew McConaughey talks about him playing tennis and how he had so much fun doing that. And then people were like, yeah, and you also get a workout in by playing tennis, which makes sense, but it's absolutely not the reason why he plays. It's not the reason why he plays. The man gets like 1 million workouts in. It's about the fun. It's just trying to hit that ball right. And like, doing that, and there's no, and it's probably also why I mentioned this, you know, big subject in my life between like self-confidence and like self-awareness and, you know, like ego and like all of these things. I feel like people, especially me, you know, like, I work hard, I work a lot, I'm successful at my job and at what I do. I need places in my life where I become that 8-year-old kid again, Like, I don't do things for anyone. I do it for me. I want to enjoy that process, maybe together with a producer. And if nobody else likes it, that is fine. It's not time wasted. And I think that is probably what connects, because I'm not trying to like bend it or like bend music into some sort of successful direction. I would be happy for it to be successful, but that is really not the aim. And I think that is why I still keep doing that, because evidently
Wonderful.
I lose money doing that.
I love that. Wonderful. And I had two more questions. Just
Go ahead, please.
One question I wanted to ask, is there some interesting differences between American rap music and Swiss? Is there something about Swiss rap that you can share with us? Something that we need to know?
I think it goes back to what I said before. Like, Switzerland as a country, as a society, as a country, as a undoubtedly so incredibly rich place, with a completely different history, can probably not fully buy into rap narratives the way we know them with our US idols. So again, like this sort of,
backstory,
these like, let me put it that way. From rags to riches, you can never go in Switzerland with rap music, or that could at least not be your narrative, because the riches won't exist because the industry is too small. So in a way, and that bears, in my opinion, a lot of negative influence on like local music, because that sense of necessity that you get with a lot of US rappers, these really like, this is my chance, that kind of focus and the ambition to make it up there. We lack that to a large extent. There's very few people, even the big musicians here, most of them still have some sort of day job, albeit maybe part-time, but like it's still kind of on that level. And that takes away that, drive and necessity. Doesn't necessarily make it worse, but it's like different storylines then. That is probably the biggest difference, I would say.
Advice to new artists.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but I feel there's probably two things. One, and I suffered. I made out of these two potential mistakes, I probably made 1.5. Like, I did 1.5 mistakes, so it's like two things. One is practice enough before you release. So like, I think for me, and that was obviously back in the day, so it didn't really play a role, but like with my first couple of records, I was still learning how to rap.
Yeah.
I think I should have learned how to rap and then thought about what am I going to talk about. So like, to have that patience to not release, to try out things, to show that maybe to 10 people and make these people your board of directors that kind of guide your career, as opposed to like uploading it to Spotify. Like, really sort of work on your craft in silence. That's one thing. And the other one is, I think I would say that, like, never follow any sort of trend, because by the time you're there, the trend may have gone another direction, and it will always feel, at least on some level, like it's not your thing. Just do you.
Always chasing.
Yeah, just do yourself, always.
I love that. No, that's wonderful.
That's a sweet sentence for the end, right?
Right. Thank you so much.
Christina, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Also check das. Du willst zu mir ein paar Sätze. Ich bin nicht mehr jung, doch noch immer unterwegs. So Halletz. Leben gone wrong in der Nachtstunden. Achtung, der Boy fährt live Go-Kart, trotz allen Platzwunden. Trotzdem Doch ich bin insgesamt noch relaxed. Wir haben gelebt und das ohne jedes Limit to the max. Rührei mit Speck, es läuft der 3 Stacks. Das Monster ultra wide macht mich ultra high. So Gedanken, bin ich jetzt ein Dadaist oder lebe ich das Leben, wo so Baba ist? Ich hab Kryptos auf den Kraken. Schau, vielleicht klappt's, ich versuch's bis ins Grab. Ich such nur noch meine Spaten. Und nur, dass nicht zu viel dran rumdenkst. Ich will noch nicht gehen, Bro, ich jag den Hummer denk. Chase Love, doch nicht die Fake Love. Ich such den Weitwurf und auch die Lay-Ups. Check, ich such Brugg zwischen Masi und Kind bleiben.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Auf der Suche nach der Brugg in eine Sinnkrise.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Ich such Brugg zwischen 𝒷𝓇𝑒𝑒𝑒𝑚 und Punchline.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Bro, Hugs oder Handschläge, ich schaff beides.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Ich hab Nostalgie-Tränen in den Augen trotz Skibrüllen. Seh uns immer noch mit 18 Wein drüllen. Aber in die Lunge. Dann von Big zu Nas, zu J zu L und Hooks nie gesungen. In der Jugend hat sich alles ums Leben in der Wahl gedreht. Dann kommt der Erste und sagt, seine Frau hat ja gesagt. Mir hat gesagt, du kannst nicht gehen, Bro, wir fesseln dich. Boomer Talk, aber früher ist es besser gewesen. Das Leben läuft, alles float so wie Gartenschlauch. Am Tag drauf geht's zusammen wie ein Kartenhaus. Ich wechsle schnell mein Lebensleimtuch, die Weste wieder rein, ich tu mir einen heiligen Schein zu. Manchmal Grosskapital und manchmal Reitschule, doch ich bin der Tom Cruise, auch ich hab die Augen weit zu. Und suche gleich immer nach einem Mehrwert, alles für ein Badhosen, Seepferd. Tja, ich such Brugg zwischen Masi und Kind bleiben.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Auf der Suche nach der Brugg in eine Sinnkrise.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Ich such Brugg zwischen 𝒷𝓇𝑒𝑒𝑚 und Punchline.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.
Bro, Hugs oder Handschläge, ich schaff beides.
Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen. Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen. Vielleicht gibt's ein Abzeichen.